Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting edge strategies to keep teams human centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dan Grunewald, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. In today's episode, Dane sits down with Eric Hanna, founder and CEO of Ambassadors of Compassion. Join us as Eric shares the transformative story from a Hollywood career to founding a pioneering mental and emotional health initiative. This episode unveils the compelling narratives and effective strategies behind building resiliency and forging deeper connections, showcasing real-life successes from schools to the workforce. Dive into a conversation that explores the power of forgiveness, the influence of culture on our lives, and the vital role of personal leadership skills in overcoming life's challenges. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name is Dane Grunewald, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group, and today I'm joined by a good friend, Eric Hanna. Eric is the founder and CEO of Ambassadors of Compassion, and a couple of years ago I met Eric, and I've really enjoyed learning about his journey and the work that his organization do, so I'm excited to share it with you all. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Dane. We've been working together for a couple of years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just interested before the show, catching up on how you got started, because I'd never asked that question. So why don't we start off there and you share with our listeners, how you came to find this mission, this purpose in life.
Well, thank you. I don't get asked that very often, so I do appreciate it. Ambassadors of Compassion was not something that I thought that I would be investing my life in. Mental and emotional health was not on the radar for my future. My background is in Hollywood, producing, directing movies and television. And that's really where I thought my life and direction was going to stay and remain. And when I got into Hollywood, I learned that Hollywood can be brutal. Without going into all the details, you put your heart into it, you make these movies, and sometimes you get hurt really bad. And I was pretty naive when I entered in the space. And I had a hard time figuring out actually how to forgive. There's a lot of injustice in that space, a lot of hurts, a lot of wounded people who tend to wound people. And a lot of people looking for love. And sometimes people who are looking for love have a lot of power and they can function from their wounds, right? So, we know the story. We all have our stuff. But I had a hard time figuring out how to forgive. And after some significant events, I tried to figure that out. And I would ask a lot of people, how to forgive. And they'd be like, you just do it. And I'm like, well, how do you do it? And it seemed like either I wasn't getting it or they didn't understand it, but I began to realize that there's more to it than just this mystical thing that's magically for you forgive. And there was a process of it. And so I had to learn how to face it, release it, replace it, as we call it, how to process through that. And as you get hurt, you get things stored in your cells and organs. And if you don't learn to release them, you function from those places. And so I began to learn how to actually feel a release of that anger that I was really struggling to let go. And even things back from even when I was younger. So I felt that release. And from that, started Ambassador Compassion, thought, gosh, if it's affecting me and it was helping my wife, could it help others? And that was really how I jumped from Hollywood to the heart.
I love it. Hollywood to the heart. That's a great soundbite. And so Ambassadors of Compassion, for our listeners, I've been to the kickoffs, they haven't. How would you describe it to them? What is the elevator pitch of what you do and the impact you make?
When we started, it was an elevator pitch. It took about 1,000 floors to get to. I think we've got it down to about 2. I love what Abraham Lincoln said. If I had more time, my letter would have been shorter.
Yeah,
I'll keep it as short as I can. But really, Ambassador Compassion is a mental and emotional resiliency building program. We've had nearly 100,000 students that have gone through the program across the country, and adults as well. The data is pretty remarkable, from University of Alabama all the way to school districts around the country. Just in one school district in Santa Ana, California, as tracked by a principal, 88% less assertive discipline infractions after the students finish the program. F's dropped by 48%, A's increased by 37%, and unattended or unexcused absences dropped by 52%. And I think the reality is, whether it's middle school, high school, or college students going through the program, when when distraction goes away and focus comes in, true purpose comes out, and all of a sudden remarkable things begin to take place. And so it starts with a 2-hour kickoff. We've been doing this in schools across the country, but now we do kickoffs in stadiums.
Yeah.
We just did the SoFi Stadium last summer, Ram Stadium, and then a stadium in New York. And the stadiums allow us at this level to bring schools together. The needs are so great in public schools. Mental, emotional health is so great. And the Ambassadors Program, being measured by organizations, have concluded that we're one of the most effective mental and emotional health programs there is across the nation. So it's all been evidence-based, built from the data from the beginning, had to work, right? It had to work because we wanted to see change lives. And now we're seeing the needs are so great. The stadiums begin the kickoffs, bring all the students together. And there's 10 more weeks where students go through their small groups each week. Each week they go through their digital or life journals, and they process through labor, influence, forgiveness, and experiences, and learn how to forgive, overcome negative experiences, set their goals and dreams, and remarkable things happen. So it's about 10 weeks from the beginning to the end, and it's measured every step of the way.
Yeah, I find it so powerful. I know I came to one of your kickoffs up at a high school here in LA, and the way you introduce the topics in that kickoff and then get those small groups, those small teams of students sharing. I mean, we all talk about the importance of trust and psychological safety. The way you connect with these humans that have got all different stories and get them to share something of themselves, it's such a huge foundation for what they then go on to do in the next 10 weeks.
Well, that's a good point, Dan. You're talking about the architecture of the program. There is content, but that's probably one of the 5 components that I guess we'd say is the secret sauce. It is those small groups. Every week there's youth that are in a group, or adults in a group of about 6 with one facilitator that guides them through the questions on the topic each week.
Yeah.
And if it's the area of forgiveness, it's, who hurt you? What have they done? Why won't you forgive? And then you got to go out and forgive somebody that week. A very common thing is it starts under our life acrostic, like I said, labor, influence, forgiveness, experience, where you have to identify your goals and dreams first. And it happens very, very, very often. A girl's got a chance. She sets her dream that she wants to get a scholarship to play lacrosse. And under the next week, under how culture and people influence your life, you have to step away from those that are keeping you from your dream and embrace those that support. And so that week in that small group, the girl says, I've got a chance to get my college scholarship, but my boyfriend doesn't want me to go.
Yeah.
Well, this week, you either have to step away from your boyfriend or you have to change your dream. And the small groups hold everybody accountable to getting to their dream. And it's like, Dane, it's like when you play a sport or an instrument. If you just watch a video on it or hear information on it, you're not going to be a great athlete. You're not going to be a great musician. You have to put it into practice. And same way with the soul. You get a little bit of information, you go out and you put it into practice. You're held accountable, and it wires that soul to where you will get to the dreams and the goals you have in your life.
Yeah, I love that. And it is really attaching to the soul. You see it in the 2 hours. I wasn't part of the ongoing small group formats, but you've had some huge numbers of people come through the program. And one of the things that I found interesting was how you were attaching to sports teams, both in high school, and I know you did a lot of work down at the University of Alabama, who had some pretty substantial success in their recent history.
Yeah, the University of Alabama, the data, and you can see that online at ambassadorsofcompassion.com, but students with a 3.0 increased their grades by 9.24% of those who hadn't taken the program. Students with a 2.0 or less increased their grades by 43%. And the retention rate was unbelievable. I think it was nearly 6% retention rate for the students that took the program, stayed in college. Colleges struggle with a high retention rate. Interestingly enough, then Alabama had their students take some athletes from different sports teams at the high school level. Yeah. And 4 of those high school teams won state and national championships, and they contributed to the Ambassador Compassion Program because the bond it created and the connection it created and cleaning out the heart and focus comes in. And I think that's what we're seeing as now we're created something called life in the workplace for companies. The bond, the retention, the connection, that we're able to see begin to happen in companies as well as we've seen through sports teams.
Yeah. And it makes me remember back to a conversation I had just recently with a coach of mine. So I'm doing a lot of mindset coaching right now. And I said, everything's feeling so good right now. It's like, I'm seeing it. It's happening in the right way. I'm responding well. And he was just like, Dane, that's awareness. You've been living with a low level of awareness for a long time. And I'm kind of lifting you into this awareness, which is that the universe has given you all of these attributes to go out and be successful, but that can become clouded by some of those pains that we carry. You mentioned it earlier,
Right.
Wounded people wound people. So maybe as you think about that awareness framework that you're creating for these teams and small groups, could you walk us through the life acrostic and just give us some deeper examples of how labor, influence, forgiveness experiences kind of flow through that 10-week program?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. As I stated earlier, and you were there, it starts with the 2-hour kickoff. And
Yeah.
the kickoffs are key because it puts students or adults. I literally was just in a school district in New York, and we took every single, I won't say the name, but I love what the superintendent said, that our teachers, I'll say nicely, are struggling as much as our students.
Yeah.
So we took every teacher at a school district in New York through the program. So it doesn't matter whether it's adults or students. You start in that small group, and those small groups in that 2-hour kickoff under labor, influence, forgiveness experience, whether it's at a stadium with live speakers or whether it's a video, individuals like Noel G from the Fast and Furious talking about how culture influences your life, right? And he's very powerful, 7 minutes, talks about that. And then the groups, every group in that live moment of that kickoff has about 15 minutes, and every person, student, adult, guided, gets to talk about how the culture is affecting their life. Then we go to a powerful speaker on forgiveness. And then you're able to ask, this is before you go back into the small groups every weekend to the institution or school or business you came from, but forgiveness. Who hurt you? What have they done? Why won't you forgive them? And it all starts at the beginning with labor. So you got to start by identifying your dreams. Now, when you're in high school, you allow students to open range dream, right? Like there's no restrictions, dream, right?
Yeah.
But when we do the life in the workplace, it's built about relationship. What dream do you have for your relationship, for your future within your job? We're not asking them to dream outside of their business, but how could they dream within their business, right? How could they help create a better work environment? How could they be a better individual? Are they the type of people that they would hire if they were in charge? If not, why? What can they do to be more engaged? What they can do to create a better work environment? What can they do? I mean, it's really about creating a better work environment, and then also being able to get closer and connected to the folks they work with. I mean, when we did the school district recently, the students, and I apologize, I'm going all over the place.
You're good. I'm following.
Bring it back in, but teachers were saying the next day, we're still feeling it. And I'm like, why? And they said, because we had no idea that the teacher next to us who's doing copies, spouse was cheating on him last night. We had no idea what was going on. And so when you ask kids about their dreams, and then you ask adults, I had one teacher say, well, my dream is to live to be 54. And I said, why? And said, because, well, my dad died at 54. Well, what could keep you from that dream? Wow, the way I eat and the way I drink. So dreams are different for adults than they are for kids and students, but it starts with the dreams. Then you go into the issue of how people influence your life, right? We walk through that. Who are the people in your life that you think are actually your friends?
Yeah.
Are they supporting your dreams or not? Do they stand by your side? Do they, and we teach students to understand, wow, these people maybe aren't really my friends. They're acquaintances, but are they really my friends?
Yeah.
And, that's a whole revelation for a lot of young men and women to realize that their friends may not really be their friends. And then you go into the forgiveness. And then finally we end with Anthony Robles. Anthony Robles never lost a wrestling match his senior year. When we're there in the school, we have to do it by video. His senior year wrestling at Arizona State University. But although he never lost a wrestling match his senior year, he was homeless and only has one leg.
Yeah.
You see him win the ESPN award and the Jimmy V award for perseverance. And a lot of kids are like, man, if he can do it, I can do it. So it's about having an individual share their story on that topic, having the students or adults start to participate with that topic.
Yeah.
Right. Start to open their heart in those 4 areas. And then every week it only takes 55 minutes. They go into those small groups. There's a journal each week that's guided.
Yeah.
They go through, they process through ask yourselves, think about this, notable quotes and calls to action every week. They're held accountable. They also do something as ambassadors to lift up their school, their city. I mean, amazing stories if we had time. And then they're honored for taking the journey. And so we have Life, we have Rise, and we have other journeys. But in a sense, that's really it. And I call it train, measure, honor, right?
Yes.
You train, you measure it, and then you honor the results.
Yeah, I love that. And it is creating a real muscle memory. It's repeatable, it's scalable. Like you said, the teachers go to work the next day and it's still there, that energy, that acceptance, that appreciation of each other, which is something that, it's not just teachers that are struggling, it's all humans are struggling right now in one way, shape or form, whether it's socially or professionally. There's just a lot of life happening to us.
That's right.
So I think we need to bring some of that human connection back into play.
We're wired to be connected. Interestingly enough, the CDC said the two most preventative things to prevent suicide and also bad behavior is to build emotional resiliency and connectedness. This is the CDC 2023.
Yeah.
They also go on to say that if you can teach this to youth when they're young, they are the most preventative, protective factors for health issues when they're adults.
Yes.
Suicidal thoughts, victimization, crime, illicit drug use, anxiety. So it's beyond just what's happening at that moment. You can carry it into your adulthood.
Yeah. And we know that's critical. We're seeing this whole epidemic of mental health crisis. It's in our workplaces, it's in our families, it's in, our shopping malls, it's everywhere. I think the fact that by creating that connectedness, by giving people a model to know how to share and how to do the work, particularly because, not everyone can go out and afford a good therapist, where you're bringing this platform in that allows people to experience some of what might happen in therapy, but share it with others, build that connection. And it reminds me, which we talk a lot about on the show lately, is the epiphany effect, which is where when a group of people come through a learning moment, particularly a more emotional learning moment together, that bond that they create is a lifelong bond.
It is.
And so if we can see that in our schools, if we can see that in our organizations, if we can keep coming back repetitively and building new bonds, you've got to think that we're going to be healthier people, but also much healthier teams.
No, you're right. The critical part is that connection. And then the other part that ambassadors focus on is really equipping individuals with the personal leadership skills necessary to navigate and succeed through life's inevitable challenges. You got to have the right tools. So challenges come to everyone.
Yeah.
And when they do, we want everybody to be ready, right? Researchers say that anybody who's ever had a dream, 95% quit along the way. Only 5% get there because nobody told them that obstacles, delays, detours, and failures are part of the path.
Yeah.
The reality is that there's no path to greatness without obstacles, delays, detours, and failures. And many times it means you're on the right track. But if you're not told that, you think, wow, I must have the wrong dream. I must have the wrong vision. And people quit.
Yeah.
Just by not knowing that.
And that's, we're living in a culture that puts entrepreneurs like Musk and Gates and others, Bezos, up on pedestals and says, oh, look what they've achieved. I'd like to achieve the same. But we're only seeing one small piece of the picture, which is where they landed, not how they got there.
Right.
And also where we're overly focused on wanting to be where they are rather than thinking about what do we as our innate human selves want to achieve in our lives. So I think social media and culture drives us towards trying to be that apex,
right.
At that apex, rather than understanding there are so many great pathways in life, and that, to your point, if you continue on the journey and you let those obstacles, detours, delays, failures kind of shape and inform where you're going to go, you can still land in a great place with a great community that you belong to and have a great life.
You're right. I mean, we work with a lot of pro teams and CEOs and over the years, and most of them will tell you that they learn more from their failures than their successes. for sure.
Yeah.
Although we are averse to, we don't like pain, right? We understand it when it comes to exercise or lifting weights, we get it. But outside of that, it's a little bit more challenging to receive, right? We're not really designed to, we embrace it in those areas that we understand and see results. It's harder to understand that more in life in general, but it still has the same response. I mean, if a person wants to live to 120 years old, they don't sit on the couch and try to protect themselves. We're learning now that purpose has a lot to do with longevity. On
Yes.
average, a person, if you take a healthy person at 65, and this is the data, you take a healthy person at 65 and they're both healthy. One goes on and just lives for themselves and retires. And the other one finds purpose. They live an average of 7 to 15 years longer.
Huge.
Because you're pushing. They say the worst thing is if it's cold, don't tell grandma, don't go outside. You're when you push against what's pushing against you.
Yeah.
There's actual longevity in that.
Yeah. I like that. I hadn't heard of that one in terms of the pushing, but I hear a lot when I read on health around anti-fragility, which has got a very similar context. And it's exciting, I think, if you're encouraging people not to be afraid, to go out and embrace the challenges, be ready for the challenges, not be shocked and kind of retract.
Right.
Then that creates a lot of confidence and courage over time too.
Yeah, I wish I could just be on the stage talking about how obstacles, delays, and detours came to everybody else. But
yeah,
there used to be an old hair club for men commercial where the guy says, "I'm not only the president, I'm the client." He's got his own hairpiece on. I'm like,
yeah,
that's how I feel with ambassadors. I'm not only the president, I'm the client, right?
Yeah, totally.
We're all going through stuff, right? We're all going through stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So you also touched on the service projects.
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit more about how that kind of ties into the program?
Yeah, so what's been amazing about the service projects is students and adults, but we'll take students for a moment, pick what it is they're going to do. It may be with the school, it may be in their small groups, but we've had some of the most amazing service projects. And it's everything from big ones, like in the city of Riverside, we had 4 schools come together and they took the graffiti off the walls of the city of Riverside for 43 weeks. Students got the paint donated from Home Depot and Lowe's. They got the trailer, they got the spray gun and everything. And the city of Riverside said they saved nearly $300,000, those students from the city having to take care of those walls themselves. So those are fun, amazing stories. Everywhere down to right before COVID, we had nearly 10,000 students write letters to active military men and women who were serving in Afghanistan and Iraq during that time. And we got a letter back from the military saying that nearly 80% of those men and women wore those letters in their uniform when they went out to battle.
Wow.
Who could have imagined, right?
Yeah.
And now the kids wrote them with love and care, but who would have thought that would impact a lot of those men and women? They wore them in their uniform, they said, when they went out to battle. So you never know what will have an impact on somebody. Everything from the big things to things that appear smaller could have a significant impact as well.
And again, service, you talked about, grandma going out in the cold and having to push against it. Service has a similar connotation. If you go out and do service in your community, you start to appreciate your community. If you only ever take from your community, you don't really appreciate it. So when you give,
right,
it creates this gratitude and this connection again.
There's something about it that giving is, I have seen the toughest, angriest kids. We work with a lot of at-risk kids too, who literally will be serving at-risk people in food banks, whatever. And they're like, they feel so rich. I mean, there's always somebody who has more of a need and they light up. I mean, it's something about service. It's hard. I wish I knew the science of it.
Yeah.
I do know the science of this, which is interesting. When you honor somebody, like we train, measure, honor, when you honor somebody for doing good, well, let me back up. When you're honored, like the Oscars or the award, when you honor somebody for doing something for themselves or something that they did for themselves, I'm not saying the Oscars only for themselves, but whatever that you want to say, right? It's a great feeling, it's a great emotion. But when you honor somebody for doing something for someone else, That honor fires endorphins from the front all the way to the back of the brain. It's the deepest kind of depth measurement that the brain has with endorphins. When you honor them for doing something for someone else, there's some science around that that's pretty wild. Now, how that plays out and what you're feeling when you're actually, service is like, I was talking to a friend recently, you got to pick your heart, right? It seems hard at first, right?
Yeah.
But when you're done doing it, you feel feelings of great gratitude, gratefulness, excitement that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
if you don't do it, if you haven't done it in any significant way, you won't know what that experience is like.
And that's cool, even with your workplace program, is that a lot of us show up to work, get our work done and leave. But if you're doing service together, and we see that even with our foundation, when we get people together to do certain events, again, it creates good connection. It creates appreciation. You might see something of someone that you wouldn't ordinarily see in their job.
It's true. There's that. I mean, how would you describe, from your perspective, the bond? There is a bonding. There's a bond. It just is. Yeah.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And we've had a few guests on the show where we talk about when you get people at work to be away from their work doing something constructive, like going and having a happy hour or a beach picnic's nice. But if they have to do something constructive, whether it's service at a food bank or doing a scenario, workshop, which isn't directly tied to their day jobs, they learn more. They're more curious. They're willing to take more risks. They're more vulnerable. And so we actually start to show up more like we were designed to show up as humans, and not like maybe the robots that we can at times become in our work with all the different tools and systems that are applied to us.
No, Dane, that's well said. It's interesting because in life, if you don't participate, so information is the illusion of transformation, right? We're information hungry. We get new information. We listen to a podcast. We hear a speaker, whatever that might be. Read a book. It doesn't matter what it is. We get this information, and this information fires endorphins into the back of our brain for about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
But if we don't participate with that information, it wears off and nothing happens, right? So we can be information hungry and actually feel change for a few days. But if we don't participate with the service project, if we don't participate with forgiveness, we don't participate with our goals and dreams, if we don't, it just wears off. So you see people who are getting this information all the time, but the information is not the participation.
No,
it's the information. And when you apply it, that's when the transformation begins.
That's the magic. Yeah. That's interesting. That makes me look in the mirror and feel a little bit guilty, because I get to do this podcast and talk to amazing people and get all this wonderful wisdom and information, but then I don't always put it into practice. So maybe I'm living in an illusion too.
I don't know. All I know is you're a guy who I always see you put into practice. Now I'm not with you 24 hours a day, but you are a very first Ambassadors Compassion Legacy leader. And I've always seen you show up. And that's what I so appreciate about you, is that you're not somebody who just talks about it. You get it done. Now, I'm not with you 24 hours a day.
Yeah, ask my wife. I have my dark moments.
None of us do it all the time. None of us can do it perfectly.
That's it. No, that's a great one. I've definitely taken that soundbite down. And again, we see that in corporate training. That's why I love Ambassadors of Compassion for the workplace, is that life in the workplace is that often we send people off to a classroom, they learn something really cool, and then they don't get the chance to put it in place. With your program, 10 weeks, guided, handbook, journaling, good practices. We do the practice.
Yeah, that's where the change comes.
Yeah. That's super cool. Let's take a slightly different angle on teams. You've had some great success in teaming with other people. You mentioned earlier, like Noel G, Anthony Robles. So you're bringing people in from the community, people who are known for their sports or their entertainment, which is cool, because it just makes this so much more accessible, particularly for our youth, but for anyone. But there's also some great sponsors, and I know you've done a lot of work out in Phoenix with Jerry Colangelo. So tell me a little bit more about how that all comes together for you.
Yeah, Niagara Water is a great sponsor. Costco has been a sponsor. A lot of pro and college teams. Clark Hunt, owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs have been sponsors for years. Miami Dolphins, Wayne Huizenga, sponsor for years. Jerry Colangelo, he used to own the Diamondbacks and the Suns. He brought the Olympic gold back the last 4 times, built the dream team, LeBron, Kobe, put it all back together when we lost about gosh, I don't know how long ago it was now, 16 years ago, whenever it was. So there's just a lot of men and women who just want to make a difference. And we seem to sit in a time right now where there's a huge need, as we know, with mental and emotional health and wellness. And so what these men and women have given us are different things that we need along the way. So stadiums, right?
Yeah.
I think we've used the Diamondback Stadium 3 times for honor events for ambassadors. Miami Dolphins, we've been there twice. Kansas City Chiefs, I believe once. Clark just offered his stadium again just a few months ago for us to launch in Kansas City. And again, why the stadiums? It's not just to create a rah-rah.
Yeah.
It allows us to bring many, many schools together instead of just one. And then when they do come together, the excitement of thousands of students. We're launching this fall. We did a 3-year partnership with Rotary. So we're launching the 49ers Stadium this fall with 10,000 students at 49ers Stadium, Levi Stadium. So that's coming together right now. We've got also in, let's see where we are, Charlotte, North Carolina, Phoenix we talked about, Kansas City now, New York. And again, it's just moved to the stadiums because they're incredible convening forces. The kids get so excited, right? And it allows us to bring the media out to have, companies get great added value. We get great sponsorship of the companies, right? To say, hey, these companies are the most caring companies in America for youth. And we don't just try to create exposures. We try to create a heart connection, and we have, between companies and their brand and the students that are having their lives changed and the parents who see the benefit. So, we've had sponsors from Tyson Foods to Wells Fargo.
Yep.
Right. And so we get to say, hey, when a parent says, how did my child change? Who's responsible? Well, the school, the program, but Wells Fargo, Tyson made a difference in your child's life. We love being able to do that.
That's an added benefit, isn't it? That if you're bringing this into your workplace, and you and I have spoken about this in the past, you could have companies coming in and sponsoring almost like a buy one, give one. So they're sponsoring local schools, and then there's local brands. So you really create a community, an ecosystem of people working together towards this one common goal and framework.
Yeah, one of the great success stories is when companies come in and they say, listen, we want to be the coaches. We'll volunteer 55 minutes, 1 hour a week to be those ambassadors, coaches. The connection for the employees, it's amazing. I love what University of Alabama professors wrote to us. We're not sure who changed more, us or the kids, because we didn't know how to forgive. We didn't know how to overcome our own negative experience, and we learned along the way.
Yeah.
The connection between the employees and the students and the company is amazing because, according to, it's a little bit concerning, right? 78% now, according to Gallup 2022, 78% of all employees are now disengaged, with 22% actively sabotaging the company they work for. And, what point do you become an expert? I don't know. We've taken nearly 100,000 kids, but in my experience of watching and going all around the country, a lot of that has to do with unresolved hurt and pain.
Yeah.
And if you don't learn to release that hurt and pain, it will manifest in different ways. And healthy people tend not to sabotage the company they work for. Make things worse, 76% of all Gen Zs have now quit a job because work is too emotionally challenging. Harvard 2022.
Right.
Now, that includes working at McDonald's. So I don't know about you, but if I worked at McDonald's when I was a kid and I said, Dad, it's too emotionally challenging, I'm not saying it's not for the kids. It is. My dad would put me in the car and send me back to McDonald's.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that there is a lot of concern that if we don't move quickly to help build resiliency among this young generation, we're going to have an unrecognizable workforce in the next 7 to 10 years.
Yeah. Which is why I like the combination, because we're all, as business owners, even as consumer brands, whether they're going to be your employee or your consumer, you need healthy communities. To your point, healthy communities don't sabotage, they create value, they build.
Yes.
So we need to put the time into our employees and into our youth and keep that cycle going.
Yes. And so I digress there, but to go back to your question about added value, there's added value for the in the journals every week, the CEO speaking to the kids on video, at the kickoff events, the media that we get. But there's also added value to the employees when they're going through the program and life in the workplace. There's added value if they choose to volunteer each week, only 1 hour a week. There's a lot of people who want to help youth, but we find that they don't know how to. This
Yeah.
gives opportunity without a lot of time to make a measured impact on the lives of youth. And in Santa Ana School District out here in California, we've had volunteers from companies come for 6 years now. They just keep coming and coming. So I think, and then the other added value is building that bond between young men and women and the companies and seeing the connection, and then hopefully creating a better workforce that when they're ready to go into the workforce, not only does the company recognize, well, these are the amazing kids,
Yeah.
the kids are like, students are like, man, that's an amazing company.
Yeah. They can spot it. And
Yep.
there's a shared language and framework for assessing what's good and great in that model.
Right.
Like, we don't have enough language around how to support each other through tough times.
Yep.
We're very good, particularly in the Western world, at putting on a brave face and saying everything's great and not really sharing how we truly feel, or
Right.
what really excites us or makes us afraid.
It's very true.
So I think your framework creates that in a very quick and healthy way.
Yeah, to your
Which is
point, Dane,
powerful.
those small groups, those small groups that they start in the kickoff, then they go in for the next 10 weeks we talked about.
Yeah.
But we always say every week, hey, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is
Yeah.
the positive version of that, right?
Yeah.
What happens in your small group stays in that small group. And when you feel that you really can say anything, amazing things come out. The dark things come out into the light. They become lighter. You hear your own voice and you're saying, did I really say that? Do I actually believe that? That doesn't sound right. Just hearing yourself say something about your life, like, oh, I'm this, or I'm a loser, or I'm never going to get there. Did I actually say that? Just hearing yourself say certain things in a safe environment causes you to change your behavior just on that alone, to go, why do I believe that? And then the program helps you dive through why you would believe that, how to undo that, what's the
Yeah.
right belief for your life based on where you're going and what have you.
So you fill the vacuum up with positives.
Yeah.
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 One thing that this conversation really reminds me of is a conversation I had yesterday, actually, with Dr. Esther Zaladon. Esther does a lot of work around helping communities to find their purpose. And one of the interesting things that she said that we've forgotten how to do is we don't ask people what their aspirations are. So when we meet someone, we're like, what do you do? Where do you work? Where do you live? But we never say, what do you hope for? And I think the fact that, as you said, when you get into that early part of the life acrostic, we're saying, what's your goal? What's your dream? What are you working towards?
Yeah.
That's also something that we just don't see enough of in society right now. We don't allow our youth or our employees to really share what they're aspiring towards on a very regular or serious basis.
I'm glad you brought that up, because in ambassadors, there's a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
There's think about this, where you're sharing information and ask yourselves, opening up your heart and calls to action. But questions crafted the right way get past the blocks and the hurts in people's heart.
Yeah.
And if you can ask the right question, you can get past the defensive and get a response where people hear themselves and they're able to share in a safe place. And if you come and say you're this or you're that, natural defenses go up, and we aren't able to get to the depth of what's really going on in our heart sometimes by statements. The right questions tend to do that.
That's neat. So you definitely named the show From Hollywood to the Heart. You gave us a great soundbite at the beginning. I guess one of the questions I always like to wrap up with is, hopes for the future of teamwork. What do you hope to see, as your program continues to expand into schools nationally, internationally, into businesses, seeing businesses and schools come together? What do you think that does for teams in the future?
Well, it's interesting. For years, I had a lot of companies ask, could you take Ambassadors of Compassion to the workplace? And I kept saying to myself, lasers cut through things, floodlights make things look pretty. So I'm going to be laser focused on this generation. But, we started 14 years ago. It was a different time than it is now.
Yeah.
And I was in with films and clothing and my background, and youth culture and adult culture were separate. But as it relates to emotional mental health, there's just souls, and
Yeah.
age doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
You have adults that are struggling with things the same way youth are, the same way parents are, and we've never seen anything quite like this. And so uh, part of our dream, first of all, for the youth side, is we want to get to 1 million students a year in America. That becomes the tipping point.
Yeah.
Some of what Malcolm Gladwell says, and we're talking high school students, you can begin to create a tipping point where students learn to identify their goals and dreams and learn to forgive, overcome their negative experiences, um, and then encourage others to do the same.
Yeah.
And I think that now I'm so excited to be working with adults because I know what it is like to work with kids, and it's so neat. They are our future leaders, but
Yeah.
adults are our leaders now.
Yeah.
Today. And it's like, wow, this is really fulfilling for me. I get to do both. And I have such a passion because when you speak and you give a safe environment for adults to share and equip them with their tools, it's amazing what comes out. I mean, I'll be candid. I had a couple really tough teachers when I was at elementary school. I mean, they should have been out of the space. They were broken, but it affected almost my entire life until I learned how to process the forgiving them until I was older. Because when you're a kid, you believe them, right? They seem like they're second in command to God. They're teachers, they have all the authority, right? And they have to come to school kind of acting like everything's okay when it's not. And some of them, when I grew up, didn't do a good job at that, right?
No.
And it affected me. And so to be able to take teachers to the program and watch and go, I know this in my head, but watching teachers, I can get emotional.
Yeah.
Crying, talking about real life things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, I didn't know that as a kid. I believed everybody in this room was all perfect, and you don't know that. Yet they're so not. They're just humans like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I get excited to see what we can do to help make a stronger workforce, because those numbers are not good. The disengagement is not good. And a lot of it has to do with, and you're asking about goals, it's really, we want to get to that 1 million student tipping point.
Great.
But to get to as many corporations or small businesses that want to help their staff, because what we're seeing is that when adults go through the program, they don't just become more connected on the job. They don't just become more resilient. They don't just become more engaged, but it affects their families. They're better spouses. They're better parents. And if I can leave with this, and I know this is not really directly answering your question, but
that's good.
It's on my heart. There was a landmark case a few years back where a young 12-year-old girl got a brand new heart transplant. And for about 2 weeks, every night, she had a dream of a man strangling her to death after she got this heart transplant. And after about 2 weeks, her mom got pretty concerned and did some discovery and noticed that her daughter had gotten a heart from a girl that had been strangled to death. They went down to the police officer. They drew the image from the girl's dreams, and they caught the man 3 days later. Now, that's a powerful example of how we can pass on hurt and pain. But how many times are we passing on our own hurt and pain to others, to those we love, to those we care about? Researchers say that when we get hurt, if we don't learn to release it, it gets stored in our cells and organs. Yeah. And that example of that heart scenario I just shared is an example of it getting stored in your cells and organs. Now, that's a dramatic example. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But how many times are we getting hurt in our heart and we're passing it on to those we love, passing it on in the workplace? And the hard part is this, is that if we don't learn to forgive, this is just research, okay? We'll tend to name, blame, and shame others who don't agree with us. It divides families, friends, the workplace, and eventually a nation.
Yeah.
Plus, if you can learn to forgive, just the science of it, you're 500 times more likely to die by the age of 50 if you don't learn to forgive because the toxins build up in your body. Yeah. Just take that one point. Now, Ambassadors, out of all the things we do, only has one little part in forgiveness. There's a lot more than that. But I don't have time to talk about all of it. But think about it. You come to work, you're hurt. You don't know how to release it. You're taking it out on others. You feel triggered. You're blaming, you're shaming. There's no real conversations. You can't have real, honest conversations when you're hurt and triggered and wounded. No. But yet we are an offended nation. We're struggling right now. And if we can learn to release that, just the science behind it, how much healthier will our families be, our workforce, and beyond.
I think healthy teams, healthy families, healthy communities, that's a huge call to action.
So that's my heart. My heart would be, because I lived with a lot of hurt and pain for years and years and years. And I didn't make best choices with my kids. They'll tell you, I've grown a lot. I've had to work through it, but man, I've had regret because of why did I act that way?
Yeah.
Why did I act that way? Well, I was picked on and bullied. I was treated bad, whatever. Until I learned to release it, it was controlling a lot of my views on life. So
yeah, that's real.
I didn't mean to get too deep.
No, it's not too deep. And it's
At
great.
the end here, but
I've been working with this coach, as I said earlier, on mindset, and he tells me a lot about crying because in my family, I grew up and it wasn't normal for boys to cry, or to hug each other or really show much emotion. And he really works on crying. He's like, that's actually a human way of processing emotions. To your point, if you don't process your emotions, you carry them and they cause you to act out of your human nature. Yeah. So there's something real there.
I know it was hard in America, but I did a movie. I was in Australia 9 times. In Australia, it's even tougher there, man.
In some towns. Yeah, in some towns, absolutely.
Yeah, men are men, and totally.
Yeah, it's cool. So there were some great points we covered. I think learning to forgive was a huge one. Building your goals, asking people for their aspirations, the connectedness and this epiphany effect that your program creates, Eric, is phenomenal. And allowing people to, give service, be more connected to their communities as well, not just their immediate teams. So that really held up. I think my biggest soundbite was that one that information is the illusion of transformation, and you need to participate, because that's another great call to action. If what we're hoping is that the future of teamwork is healthier at work, in our communities, in our schools, then we really need everyone to participate right now in these types of programs. So on that note, for anyone who's interested in learning more about Ambassadors of Compassion, sponsoring a school to go through the project, bringing their company online, how do they find you?
You can go to aoclife.org or ambassadorsofcompassion.org. And Dane, we're excited that we get to work with you to help impact companies.
Thank you. No, I'm excited to be putting this in play right away this summer. We're going to be doing some cool stuff.
Thank you, Dane.
Thanks, Eric.
It's always a privilege to talk to you.
Likewise.
You're a busy guy. I don't know how you get it all done. I think there's 2 of you.
There's a few of us. They were all pretending to be me. Teamwork.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.